Eduardo Manzano, better known as El Polivos, passed away. He was one of the most iconic figures in Mexican comedy. His death marks the end of an era for the many generations who grew up with his humor, his characters, and his unmistakable comedic style. The news of his passing spread quietly at first, almost gently, as if the world itself hesitated before sharing something so painful. And yet, once it reached the public, it triggered a wave of memories, reflections, and sorrow that washed over millions of people who had welcomed him into their homes for decades. For many, Eduardo Manzano was not just a comedian, not just someone from television. He was the laughter that filled childhood afternoons, the warmth that brought families together, the friend who made everything feel lighter even in the hardest of times. Manzano, alongside Enrique Cuenca, became a defining figure of television comedy thanks to Los Polivoses, a program that transformed the way humor was created in Mexico and left a permanent mark on popular culture. It was not simply a show. It was a cultural shift, a new chapter in the evolution of comedy, a mirror that reflected the eccentricities, contradictions, and beauty of everyday Mexican life. Los Polivoses brought characters who felt real, funny, flawed, lovable, and unforgettable. Characters who didn't just make viewers laugh but made them feel understood. Eduardo Manzano had a talent for taking the ordinary and elevating it into something extraordinary through timing, facial expressions, and an instinctive understanding of human behavior. His humor never relied on cruelty or malice. Instead, he leaned into the absurdity and innocence of life, turning small moments into comedic treasures. Generations grew up repeating his catchphrases, imitating his characters, and recognizing the deep affection behind every comedic gesture. Through the screen, he forged a connection with viewers that lasted long after each episode ended. His work with Cuenca and Los Polivoses was more than collaboration. It was alchemy, to comedic minds merging to create something timeless. Together, they crafted a universe of characters that lived in the collective imagination of Mexico. And even as decades passed, their sketches continued to be referenced, quoted, and shared as proof of the duo's lasting influence. The show became an anchor in the cultural landscape, a reminder of simpler times when families gathered around the television, and laughter was a shared experience. In addition to his success on television, Eduardo Manzano built a solid career in film, theater, and voice acting, staying active and close to his audience until his final years. His versatility was one of his strongest traits. People knew him for comedy, but he was far more than a comedian. He had a deep understanding of performance and ability to shift moods, to connect with audiences in ways that made him memorable across generations. His voice brought characters to life in animated films. His presence elevated theater productions. His roles in cinema revealed sides of him that viewers had not seen before, softer, more reflective, more grounded. In every medium he touched, he left an imprint. But perhaps what made him so beloved was not just his career, but the person behind the performances. Colleagues often spoke about his kindness, his humility, his discipline, and his respect for his craft. Young comedians saw him as a mentor. Older fans saw him as part of their history. Children saw him as a source of joy. His presence was comforting, as if humor itself had taken human form. Even in interviews, he radiated warmth, gratitude, and a profound love for his audience. He never took fame for granted. He understood that laughter was a gift, one that he gave freely and passionately. As the news of his passing became public, a silence seemed to fall over those who had admired him for so long. It was the kind of silence that follows the end of a beautiful performance. The quiet moment where the lights dim and the audience holds its breath before applauding. Except this time, instead of applause, there were memories. People took to social media to share stories of how they grew up watching him with their parents or grandparents, how his jokes became family traditions, how his presence felt like home. His death did not just mark the passing of a beloved entertainer. It marked the end of a chapter in Mexico's cultural identity. What did his son Lalo Manzano say after his passing? Through social media, his son Lalo Manzano shared a deeply emotional message to say goodbye, expressing gratitude for the outpouring of affection during these difficult hours. There was something profoundly human in Lalo's words, something that revealed not only the grief of losing a father, but the honor of having shared a life with someone who meant so much to so many. The message resonated with the country, touching hearts everywhere, because it came from a place of sincerity and deep love. With profound sorrow, we say goodbye to my beloved dad, and we thank everyone who has respectfully expressed their messages of love, he wrote, accompanying the farewell with words filled with admiration, love, and gratitude toward his father. Those words echoed far beyond the digital space where they were posted. They carried the weight of a son's heartbreak and the light of a lifetime of memories. People could sense the closeness between them, the admiration Lalo held for his father not just as a performer but as a man. The grief felt personal even to those who had never met Eduardo Manzano, because they had welcomed him into their lives for so long. Lalo's message served as a bridge between the public figure and the private man. It reminded everyone that behind every entertainer is a human being with loved ones, with vulnerabilities, with a story that extends far beyond the screen. And in this case, that story was rich, deep, and full of moments that shaped not only a family but a nation's cultural soul. Lalo's words seemed to invite fans to mourn alongside the family, to reflect on the impact Eduardo had on their lives, and to honor his legacy through the memories they carried. The death of Eduardo Manzano brings to a close the life of an indisputable pillar of national comedy, remembered for his talent, discipline, and warm personality. But to say his life came to a close feels incomplete, because figures like him do not simply disappear. They transform into legacy, into stories passed down, into jokes retold at family gatherings, into scenes from old episodes that still spark laughter decades later. Eduardo's departure is not the erasure of a life, it is the elevation of a memory that becomes richer with each passing year. His work in television, film, and theater remains a testament to an exceptional career that will continue living in the country's collective memory. People will revisit his shows not out of nostalgia alone, but because his humor still holds value today. His comedic timing remains sharp, his expressions timeless, his characters relevant. For new generations, discovering Eduardo Manzano will be like uncovering a treasure chest buried beneath years of change, one that still shines with the same brilliance it had when it first appeared. And yet, beyond the accolades and contributions, the true magic of Eduardo Manzano lies in how he made people feel, in the comfort he brought to homes, in the unity his comedy created among families gathered around a television, in the joy he sparked during times when joy was hard to find, in the simple but profound way he reminded people that laughter could heal, connect, and strengthen the spirit. In imagining his final days, surrounded by those who loved him, one can almost feel the quiet dignity that likely filled the room, the kind that only comes from a life lived with purpose, passion, and sincerity. Perhaps he reflected on the characters he had brought to life, the people he had touched, the moments he had created. Perhaps he smiled at the thought of how far his work had traveled, how deeply it had rooted itself in the culture of a nation. Or maybe he simply rested in the knowledge that he had given the world something beautiful. Joy. Fans, colleagues, and friends now hold that joy close. His colleagues share stories of working with him, stories of long rehearsals filled with laughter, of unexpected improvisations that later became legendary moments, of behind-the-scenes camaraderie that turned co-workers into lifelong friends. Younger comedians speak of how they studied his performances to understand timing, character development, and the power of authenticity in humor. Directors recall his professionalism, how he always arrived prepared, how he respected the craft, how he gave everything to every role no matter how large or small.